Next, we have our third presentation, John Ross of Robert Morris University, presenting on friendship and politics, also dealing with the same time period.
Good afternoon. Today my topic is friendship and politics. It's a topic dealing with the story of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. A very unknown story if you enter U.S. history class in high school or middle school. The topic of John Adams isn't really mentioned as much as it should be. He doesn't get the credit that he should get. Like I said, it's a story of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. It's a story of founding fathers, and it's a story of how politics messed up a beautiful friendship between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. I chose this topic because, again, I'm very interested in U.S. history. I'm interested in almost all history. But specifically, I love the founding fathers. I love studying these people. They're humans just like all of us today, but we picture them as gods in America. They're immortalized. They have statues in Washington, D.C., and we put a lot of emphasis on it. One of these founding fathers, John Adams, doesn't get the credit he deserves. So I decided to take a semester and study John Adams and write a nice big paper about it. I based my research starting off using simple biographies, especially David McCullough's book, John Adams, and then ventured into more specific books, more in-depth books dealing with the sermon electors of 1796 and 1800s, the presidency of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, and then moved into primary sources. And a lot of my research was based off of the primary sources dealing with the letters of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. One letter in specific was a letter written on December 28, 1796. And this is really where my research came from, dealing with how friendship can't mix with politics. And the research. So the story starts with the background, or where these two men came from. John Adams came from a simple house in Massachusetts, raised as a New Englander, no slaves, didn't believe in an institution. Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, was raised in the aristocratic South, with the institution of slavery. Both of them went and attended higher education, both obtained law degrees, and both were successful lawyers. Their paths crossed once they got to the Second Continental Congress. Here, they were both members of this party to cry for independence. They wanted an independent nation. They didn't want to be, reconcile their differences with Britain anymore. We wanted an independent nation. They worked together to form a Declaration of Independence. It was actually John Adams who pushed for the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson was the one who wrote it. If it wasn't for John Adams, Thomas Jefferson probably would not have been able to draft it. Thomas Jefferson was not a great public speaker. He feared public speaking. He would not like what I'm doing right now. So it was John Adams who pushed him and said, you know what, you need to write this document. You're a fantastic writer. You can, put these ideas down to beautiful language and show the world that we want to be independent. John Adams knew he couldn't do this himself. He was very honest. He was very to the truth. He was very brutal with his words. He wasn't as great a white writer as Thomas Jefferson was. So he nominated Thomas Jefferson to be the writer of the Declaration of Independence, and together they worked in a committee to draft the Declaration of Independence, presented to the Second Continental Congress, and then eventually it was signed by the Second Continental Congress, and we were now declaring our independence, and we moved into the Revolutionary War. Both men during the American Revolution spent a majority of their time in Europe, and this is really where their friendship blossomed. Here, they took a little vacation, or a little journey is what they call it, throughout the English countryside. In the English countryside, they studied agriculture and read a lot of Shakespeare, two topics that both these men are interested in. And they spent the time together alone. It was just another great example of their friendship. Also in Europe, Thomas Jefferson gave John Adams a book that he wrote. The book was The Notes on the State of Virginia. It was a book that John Adams found very dear to himself because in the book, Thomas Jefferson stated how he disliked slavery, how it was an institution he didn't agree with. So John Adams, was very fond of this book. And the importance of this book, it comes in the portraits done by Martha Brown. Both men were staffed for portraits in Europe by Martha Brown. In John Adams' portrait, you can see the book of the States of Virginia, or the Notes on the States of Virginia, right on his desk. You can see it very clearly, so it must have been very important to him. It must have showed his importance of his friendship to Thomas Jefferson. So this is what was happening during the Revolution in Europe. After the Revolution is where this friendship that was blossoming fell apart. After the Revolution, you had Shays' Rebellion, you had the new Constitution, and you had the French Revolution that started to grow. From here, these three events specifically destroyed the friendship, or it began the destruction of the friendship. There's political differences that they saw from these events, such as Shays' Rebellion. Thomas Jefferson believed Shays' Rebellion was a good thing. He believed that rebellions like Shays is good for a nation. It stirs the pot up a little bit. John Adams, on the other hand, thought it wasn't good. He thought it was going against the way everything was. He thought it was going to hurt the weak government that we had at the time. So he's like, it's just not right. So both men were part of Washington's administration during these events such as Shays' Rebellion, the new Constitution, and the French Revolution. After Washington decided not to run for a second term, came the election of 1796. This is where one of the first elections where there was two parties. You had the Federalists with the leader of John Adams, and then you had the Republicans with Thomas Jefferson. It was a brutal campaign, it was a dirty campaign, but neither man really contributed for it. It was the parties, it was the leaders of those parties that did the work, that wrote the mean articles about each other, that spread gossip and rumors throughout the election. At the end of that election, John Adams won. He became the second president of the United States. After the election, Thomas Jefferson wanted to write a letter to say, good job, you're still an old friend of mine, I support you, in that sense. The letter was never sent, though. The letter was sent to James Madison instead. James Madison reviewed this letter and said, you can't send this letter. This is political suicide if you ever send this letter to John Adams. If this letter would get to public to see that you supported John Adams, our enemy, being from the Federalist Party, and John Adams is a failure as a president, how are you ever going to run as president after John Adams? So, instead of sending a letter to John Adams, which would have been a great sign of friendship, Thomas Jefferson decided not to send it. And that's the letter that I quoted in the beginning of the speech that was sent, or was supposed to be sent, the 28th of December on 1796. Again, this would have changed history, I believe. I think it would have maintained a friendship. I think the working relationship between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, especially during John Adams' administration, would have been stronger. During John Adams' administration, one of his first acts was to open his administration up to the Republicans and open it up to Thomas Jefferson. He wanted to work with the Republicans and Thomas Jefferson to solve the problems, especially the French Revolution. But Jefferson was instructed by leaders of the Republican Party not to work with him. So it wasn't a very good working relationship. And from here, after the election of 1796, during the administration of John Adams, the friendship broke or fell apart. This is where the election of 1800 came. After his first term of presidency, John Adams was going to run again. This time, Thomas Jefferson, the vice president, was going to run against the incumbent president, which never happened before also. Again, it was another dirty election full of scandals. Adams upset his party. He upset his party by going against Alexander Hamilton. And Jefferson used this to his advantage and was able to win the election of 1800. After winning the election of 1800, Thomas Jefferson became president, and John Adams kind of went into history. He was kind of out of the light. The two men reconciled their differences with the help of Dr. Benjamin Rush. He said, you two men, you are the two last people really of the spirit of 76, meaning the two last people who signed the Declaration of Independence. You're two very important people in U.S. history. You need to reconcile your differences because you had such a great friendship. So that's what they did during their retirement years. They both wrote each other a lot, talking about different topics such as, how the current situation in America, religion, agriculture, more Shakespeare. They sent many letters back and forth to each other. You can still read these letters today. This is where a lot of my research was done. Both men died on the same day, July 4th, 1826. So it's one of those American history stories that has, some fun connections, how they both died on the same day, they both met on the same day, being July 4th, died on the same day of July 4th. It was a great friendship that was destroyed by politics.